All right, continuing with Reddit AMA, but not for much longer. I've already gone on an hour longer than intended, and I still haven't had lunch yet. It's almost 2 p.m. here in Japan, so I think I'll be wrapping it up soon, but just a couple more questions. The first question from user Afix, who writes, which episode of the Corbett Report are you most proud of, including interviews and other segments? And what other podcasts do you most anticipate the release of on a regular schedule? Okay, excellent questions. With regards to my own work, I must say that the single piece of work that I've done that I'm most proud of is the Federal Reserve documentary. I put 7 months into the production of that documentary, and it turned out pretty much exactly like I wanted it to. It was intended as something that could be used both as an introduction to the subject for people who knew nothing about the Federal Reserve, and as something that I think would teach more of the details about the subject to people who do know about the Federal Reserve, as well as opening up the discussion that I think is the important part of that discussion about what will replace, what can supplant the current Federal Reserve-led fiat money paradigm. And I think that is obviously the crux of the issue, and I hope that the documentary does that. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on it, over 250,000 views now for a 90-minute documentary on monetary policy, so I think it accomplished everything that I could have hoped for it. So that is the single piece of work I'm most proud of. When it comes to various podcast episodes, I mean, there's a lot of different ones out there. I would refer people for an early episode that I think was a very, very important episode for the information it contained. I would refer people back to my podcast on P-Tech and the 9/11 software. I'll put the link in the response here on Reddit so you can follow that. I think that some podcasts that stand out in my mind are some of the ones that I've done that are a bit different and take a different tack. Like, for example, my Message to the Future. I like that episode because it was something just completely different that I'd been thinking about for years, and I finally did it, and it came out pretty well, I think. I recently did How to Herd Your Tax Cattle, which has been a very popular episode. I know a lot of people like it, and I'm glad they do. I think some of the recent episodes of the open source investigations on Ebola, on MH17, on ISIS, with those presentation style formats, I think that's more the future of the podcast in many ways. Not that I'm going to specifically and always do that format, but I think it's a very good format for conveying lots of information. I think the most recent episodes have conveyed more information and can certainly contain more links than any of my work previously. So I think we're really expanding what we're doing, and I'm excited about that. There are many other episodes that I think are worth checking out, so it's hard for me. It's like asking me to choose my favorite baby. Luckily, I only have one actual son, so I don't have to choose favorites. But when it comes to my podcast, I have nearly 300, and very, very difficult to choose favorites among those. But again, I'll put links to some of those that I mentioned there in the notes to this video response on Reddit. Also, what other podcasts do you most anticipate the release of on a regular schedule? I would say that varies so much. I'm always subscribing, unsubscribing, resubscribing, mixing it up, trying to figure out. I mean, I'll never come to sometimes you just tire of a podcast. You want to hear something different. But I would say that recently, in terms of sort of the weekly news type of roundup podcast, Revelations Radio News is very important for me. They usually cover a couple of dozen stories in each episode, and generally I will not have heard of half of them, maybe, or a quarter of them. That's completely new information to me, so it's valuable in that sense. Also, Pierce Redmond of Porkins Policy Review does excellent podcasts. Unfortunately, he does not do very many of them, but when he does, they're always very informative. And his recent new podcast venture with Christoph Giermann of The New Great Game, with the New Great Game podcast, absolute essential must listen for anyone who knows about or cares about the significance of Gladio B and Central Asia and the Caucasus. Extremely important stuff. They cover it in a great degree of detail. Always fascinating listening. So those are two that I would recommend right off the top of my head. Thank you again for the question, Afix. I appreciate it.